Hello YouTube, hello everyone, and please welcome, you may know him, but he's a new guest on any podcast of mine, Mr. Ian Warner.
Hello there YouTube, is the way I usually start my videos, but...
And you're known by some other names on the internet, I think.
Oh, well, I was on YouTube initially, I was known as DarthAzABrush.
Yes.
Which is actually my email address. But other than that, there's been a few sort of usernames I've gone on to years from other role playing games and things. But yes, it's the same me. It's the one that I think it's the RPG pundit called me the craziest guy in role playing games.
And of course, in charge of Kittiwake Publishing.
Yeah.
Never forget that part.
Such as it is.
Yeah. Now, this is a little bit sort of tricky, because I wanted to do a video on every episode of this season of Doctor Who. I've done reviews, including a very concise one for Listen, I think.
Yes. Well, I've told you before. I'm not as sort of disappointed by this, but I've got my reasons.
Right. And then obviously with Time Heist, I actually liked it, but we did the chat with you, James, who of course had to be contrarian, had to hate even the good episodes. You know, even one of the best ones of the season, in my humble opinion, he had to hate it. Tell me your opinions of Listen and Time Heist.
Well, Listen, I thought it was Moffat trying to be clever again. But that isn't always a bad thing. And with Listen, what I found was, I don't think he intended it to be this way. I think he intended it to be like a really sort of deep and meaningful drama. But I just found it really funny, the way they were creating all these big continuity loops and just generally writing the script for 70 years of Doctor Who to come or something. It was really, really weird. So it's like all the previous stuff of the Doctor, even when they did with Clara going through the time vortex and meeting all the previous ones, they never went as stupid as that.
I felt that Listen had no payoff, although I found bits creepy, nothing really scared me. I think if you had that dream that the Doctor references as the dream everyone's had, or rather, if you can remember, because of course you don't remember most of your dreams, but no, I thought it was tedious and painful. I actually enjoyed Robot of Sherwood more.
Robot of Sherwood was supposed to be more enjoyable. I think it was a case of let's do a bit of pantomime with Doctor Who and have Ben Miller play the Sheriff of Nottingham.
Absolutely, Ben Miller as the Sheriff of Nottingham.
It's certainly a step up from his long-term comedy partner Pollux Armstrong's appearance in Doctor Who.
Wasn't he Sarah Jane's computer?
He was also, Alexander Armstrong was also in episode A Christmas Special with where he was playing an RAF pilot and nobody could take it seriously because of course he plays the chatty RAF pilot.
Oh yes, I've already the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, the most forgettable Doctor Who episode. Oddly enough, I thought Handles was voiced by one of those guys, but no, Handles is Wadge from Four Lions, who's also the phone jacker.
Okay.
I can't. Yeah, the phone jacker. AKA
I know his name, but I just can't place it. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, he was Handles. But he sounds so much like Armstrong or Miller. So far, Deep Breath I appreciate as the big epic movie kind of thing that it is. I can understand how certain people think that certain puddings were over-egged. Obviously, coming at it from a gender, sexuality, diversity individual, I see that slant. I love seeing, I love seeing a same-sex couple as superheroes, especially as they are on the big screen.
Well, Vastra and Jenny, well, actually the whole Paternoster gang, and plus the big blue chap, I've forgotten his name, Dorian.
Yeah.
That whole sort of Scooby Gang of companions we've never seen before that was assembled just for that episode initially, and then became more... I always got the impression that Stephen Moffat just crashed a game of Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space, the role-playing game of Doctor Who, published by Cubicle 7, who, yeah,
right.
I've got friends who work there, so...
Another plug.
Well, no, it's funny because they just sound like characters that a bunch of drunk role-players have come up with. I mean, you've got the lesbian ninja Silurian assassin Sherlock Holmes with kinky Cockney maid. That is just such a... There's got to be a World of Darkness player who's played something like that before.
There is. I can definitely see how there's a fan fiction / shipping element. So it doesn't surprise me if it is reminiscent of role play. I'm not sure who came up with Strax.
Oh, Strax. Never change, Strax. Never change.
So after Deep Breath, we have Into the Dalek, which I would like Into the Dalek if it weren't such a rehash or an assembly, an assortment of rehashes. Robot of Sherwood, a bit of fun, which is fine. Classic Who had its fun shows. Mythmakers would be an example, if only it existed. You know, a fun.
Later on in the there was a lot of sort of Sixth Doctor episodes that, despite the fact that Sixth had such a grim, dark series, because that's what they were aiming for. There were a couple of episodes now and again, like that ridiculous one with H.G. Wells, that were just so silly that it begged belief. It really did.
Well, I've always defended Time Lash. I don't think it was as bad as people said. Technically, I think if you're going to criticise Time Lash, I don't think it was especially bad as a story. Their representation of H.G. Wells was pretty poor. Because if you consider that he was a man who'd had to kind of play rugby with the best of them, I think, didn't he fight in World War One?
A lot of the writers of that generation did, but I'm not sure he did specifically. He certainly wrote the first story with a tank in it before the tank was invented.
Oh, wow!
It's called either the Leviathan or the Land Crawler or something. Sorry, the Land Ship. That's what it's called. It's called the Land Ship. It's a short story that appeared in a science fiction magazine in 1912.
Okay. But I mean, they kind of not only portray him as a bit of an idiot, but also as a bit of a coward. I mean, yes, it's when he was a teacher in Scotland before he was a published writer, but I'm convinced that as a person, H.G. Wells had gone through rough stuff by that point. And things like sacrificing your life for the greater good, he would have taken that for granted, I think.
Yeah, I can agree. I can agree there. It was just the well, maybe Time Lash was a bad example. I was just trying to think of one that was particularly stood out as very sort of campy. I mean, people say that about the Happiness Patrol, but they completely miss the political undertone.
Absolutely.
One of my favourite episodes, with my favourite Doctor and my favourite companion in it. So.
And Sylvester and Sophie are wonderful.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the qualifier for me when it comes to rating companions is, would it make sense for them to beat up a Dalek with a baseball bat? And if it doesn't make sense, something's gone wrong.
Exactly. And, of course, after Into the Dalek, we had Rebels of Sherwood, and after, Listen, you know what I think of Listen. Time Heist.
I thought it was kind of like an episode of Hustle. That's why I was surprised that Tony Jordan wasn't involved in writing it.
Ah, okay. oh, yes, I remember your comment.
And for those of you in the colonies, Hustle is a British series which is basically very similar premise to Ocean's 11, only it doesn't suck.
I feel so weird. I've never seen Ocean's 11 or Ocean's 12. Or I do get the best thing I heard about, the reference I got, maybe I'm just old, but when someone referenced the Italian Job and how great would it have been, the Doctor tries to use the sonic screwdriver to open a bank vault, but accidentally blows up the... and Clara says, "You were only supposed to blow the bloody doors off."
That would have worked, but the other thing, of course, role-playing wise, I picked up from that, it was the Doctor sets up a Shadowrun that he's on. Shadowrun was a role-playing game invented in the early 90s, which, depending on who you ask, was the time that either role-playing games got more serious or got more stupid. Basic idea of it is it's like near future that's very cyberpunky, but at the same time, magic has come back to the world, and people have started mutating into different, what we call meta-human groups, like orcs, trolls, dwarves, elves. And Shadowrun has really stupid missions like the Time Heist, and the idea of having one person on the team actually be the fixer that set you up, but he's erased his own memory. That sounds like something a Shadowrun GM would pull on you.
I mean, there's so many kind of references in this, and people will say that there's touches of X-Men. I need to catch up. People are always referring to these things. Did you think there was a big lend from X-Men in Time Heist?
She wasn't quite Mystique. The power was the same. The superpower was shape-shifting, although Mystique doesn't have to touch people to do it. She can just look at people.
Okay.
And not only that, but it's never been quite explained, but she just needs to listen to somebody talking for a couple of seconds and she's got their voice. Because there's this wonderful little scene in X-Men 2 where she's talking to Nightcrawler and he goes, "They say you can imitate anybody, even their voice." And she turns back to him, "Even their voice." Because in the comics, of course, Nightcrawler's her son. Hence the physical resemblance. They're both...
Right. Yeah, another example, of course, I've never seen the original comics. Well, I haven't read the original Guardians of the Galaxy comics, and I keep being told how they've changed it. And I love Guardians of the Galaxy, the movie.
Well, I still haven't seen it yet, but...
oh, you haven't seen the film?
No,
okay.
I haven't been able to get to the cinema, so...
Right. Well, the DVD, I think, is coming out round about now, so you should be able to...
Yes, well, I'll put that on the list, somewhere between Batman Assault on Arkham and a few others.
Yeah, there's a lot out there. Actually, I'm very interested to see, because I tuned into Graham Norton. I don't actually like the Graham Norton show, but I tuned in because Peter Capaldi was on it. So there's a film and a show I'm aware of. I won't go into the show because it's not really relevant. A movie version of The Equalizer, starring Denzel Washington, and I'm really interested in that. Because apparently I'm too young to, or we're both too young to remember the show, but this movie, he has OCD, so I am very interested.
Yeah, that does sound interesting.
Yeah, because I mean it's often mishandled, like Monk, a detective with OCD. I've never seen Monk. From what I've heard, it's mishandled. Action hero with OCD. That could go either way, as far as I'm aware.
It sounds hilarious, just saying.
So, yeah, I mean, increasingly I care about not just GSD representation, but also neuroatypical representation, mental health in general, and I think it's pretty cool, especially given that with something like Sherlock, which I love Sherlock, but they keep changing their minds because they've actually attributed OCD, Asperger's, and sociopath to him. Make your mind up.
Well, yeah, it can be a combination because all of them have activist groups from all three have used him as an example. So then again, it's like dyslexia. When the dyslexia awareness started, everybody was using Einstein, Churchill, and a few others, which they very, very much were, but there are other things wrong with them as well.
That's true.
Well, not sorry wrong with them, but they had other issues as well.
Einstein had everything.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they've still got his brain in a jar somewhere in one of the universities he studied at. Sorry, not studied at, taught at. In America, they've actually got Einstein's brain in a jar.
I did not know that. I knew that his final words were heard, but that no one knows what they are because nobody at the hospital spoke German. I knew that bit.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yeah, so Einstein's final words could have been something amazing and important and profound about the universe, but nobody will ever know because they didn't speak German.
Then again, they could have been as bad as Vespasian's final words. The Emperor Vespasian, the Roman Emperor, who decided to use the fact that he was dying to mock the tradition of making an emperor a god.
Right.
So his final words were, "Oh grief, I think I'm becoming a god."
Excellent. I read an article this week. I'll try and link it to you and link it in the description. That compared Stephen Moffat with whichever emperor it was who knew he wasn't popular and decided to make himself seem sweeter in the recollection of history by electing a replacement that would be even worse. I can't cite the comparisons. Like Augustus, I think.
It wasn't Augustus. No, it's Tiberius.
Tiberius.
It was Tiberius because Augustus was the first emperor.
Right.
Then he passed it on to Tiberius. He didn't want to pass it on to Tiberius. He wanted to pass it on to his nephew, but that nephew was imprisoned in a really weird political plot. And then Tiberius was pretty bad. I mean, but then, of course, he deliberately left it to Caligula because he knew Caligula was insane.
Yeah, of course. Yes, baby munchingly, sister fuckingly insane.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, the infamous exploitation film of Caligula was... everybody goes on about it being over the top, but it was pretty accurate as a representation of what the guy was like.
So, marrying your horse, making that same horse a senator, declaring war against the ocean.
Yes. I mean, as much as Mary Whitehouse complained about it, when they did the Caligula bits in I, Claudius, they were quite tame by the standards of what Caligula got up to. And it was John Hurt playing Caligula. And he proved my assertion with John Hurt, and he proved this with the War Doctor, is no matter what you put John Hurt in, he is a badass. And he proved this by dancing around in a gold bikini and still being terrifying.
Tonight's episode, you know what I had to say about Listen.
Yes.
If we weren't doing this podcast, my review of The Caretaker would have been blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I see your point. It is very much Moffat going back to what he knows and writing basically character comedy. But at the same time, it really does. This fits with Doctor Who a lot more than a lot of these other basically character comedies.
How?
Well, firstly, the setting, Coal Hill School.
Mm-hmm.
You've got the actual junkyard that they originally found the TARDIS set off from. You've got the alien in this. I was a little disappointed it wasn't a Rastan warrior robot. I think it would have worked a lot better if it was actually a Rastan warrior robot. But it's a really cool looking killer robot.
Dragged out in the last 5 minutes for the sake of having a monster when nothing happens for the first 40 minutes.
Yep.
The first 40 minutes, is it a sitcom? Is it a soap opera? This is possibly the worst bit of Doctor Who I've seen in my life.
I can sympathise, but it's to me the whole. I don't think Capaldi's been any more Hartnell than he was in this episode.
Capaldi is fantastic. I love Peter Capaldi. I want him to be given decent scripts. This was an episode of Coupling, but twice as long.
No, I can see where you're coming from, but as I said, it does have. If he's going for this echoes of the first Doctor thing, I can totally see that happening now, because you've got grumpy old. Well, not Grandad. Mm-hmm. He's calling her. He was he was calling him Dad.
Oh yes, yeah.
And he was forgetting. I did like that how the 12th Doctor completely forgot he wasn't the 11th for a moment.
Well, that happens a lot. I'm going to be honest here. Sorry. By the last 5 minutes, when things actually happen, I kind of tuned out. And I've only seen this episode once. I'm not sure if I want to watch it again. Could you possibly explain to me, and for the audience at home, what actually was the plot of this fucking episode?
Well, essentially, the opening sequence really told you what the plot was, which was Clara's all sorts of messed up about whether she should actually tell, or how she's going to even begin to tell her new boyfriend exactly what the heck is going on with her suddenly turning up with seaweed in her hair and things in the middle of nowhere and exactly on time, and it's all very...
It's definitely not that she's Superman and he's Lois Lane. It's definitely not tedious retread. It's definitely not soap operatics.
It is all of those things, unfortunately, at times. But it then develops into this thing. This Doctor, again, another thing I've noticed is just some nods to the McCoy Doctor, because he always seems to have this plan in place, and for the first... As in these early bits, he's got this plan to trap this very deadly robot at night, as far away from any houses as he could possibly do, and try and avoid Unit or Torchwood turning up and wrecking everybody's day. Because we know they're going to wreck everybody's day, and that's been his main... I mean, it reminds me again, which is another Coal Hill School set episode, Remembrance of the Daleks, where his whole master plan involved keeping the military out of the way of the Daleks. And it's just there were some echoes of that in there.
But Remembrance of the Daleks is quite good. Also, continuity-wise, I think the only classic series exteriors of Coal Hill School are from Remembrance of the Daleks. I don't think Unearthly Child had any exteriors. Day of the Doctor, I think you could say, might be the same building. You could say it's the same building. This time, we got this big long shot of the back of Coal Hill School, where I thought it looked too big, too rural, and too posh, and I can't see them matching up.
Yeah, well, the problem is finding a school that looks like it's in the looks like it's sort of very sort of 60s. I mean, I tell you what, if it had not been Coal Hill School and it had been De Bowen School that's near me, it would probably work because that thing has not changed shape for over 100 years.
Well, so I think that kind of red brick Victorian building that could be a hospital, could be an orphanage, could be a school. That kind of building doesn't change, or when it does change, you can see the extensions, you can see the changes.
Yeah, but the thing is finding a school that looked exactly like that, which I mean, I know of a couple of buildings here and there that may just about pass, but they would have had trouble doing that. Sourcing a Coal Hill School would have been a major problem. Also, I was really impressed in how close they got the junkyard down. In this episode, the junkyard was bang on. It was almost like I was expecting them to tint it black and white again. The junkyard was just bang on.
I may, if it's authentically Shoreditch, I may actually have been there.
Oh.
Yeah, and I think the original set, because of course it would have been a set in the first episode, they probably did recreate the basic shape. So that doesn't surprise me. And yes, we've had Totter's Lane references, and we've had, although obviously there are questions.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that. My father actually, back in the 60s, was with his scout group, actually hired a Dalek for one of their gang shows, because there was a lot there was actually ability to do that because of the fact that the rights were still with the BBC. There wasn't the split off into Terry Nation's estate that's caused all these problems with Daleks. And they and he actually walked onto the Second Doctor set to pick it up. And the funniest thing, he said the funniest thing that it was with the Troughton set was everything was painted in black and white just to make sure the cameras could pick it up properly. So it was literally like walking into an episode of the series. And it sounded quite surreal, actually.
Wow, that's weird. Of course, some people want the toys that way, of course, because you can get the action figures.
Oh yes, you can get the black and white version of Patrick Troughton, or and there's actually a black and white John Pertwee because of the fact that a couple of his episodes ended up in black and white when they ran out of money to do the colour.
Well, technically, they lost the colour, the existing copies.
Oh, right.
Right. That they've been recolorized since by a process. I think it's called bit mapping.
Ah, right.
That's an electronic process. So no, they were originally in colour. Everything from.
Because the funny thing about Invasion of the Dinosaurs, that first episode I first saw it in black and white. It looks so much better in black and white. Because whoever it was who managed to con the BBC into the fact they could get realistic animatronic dinosaurs for really cheap, and they ended up with those things. They're a genius. They really are. And they've got to go down in heist history as one of the greatest con men of all time.
They were of the standard of the audience would still have been watching movies like, the Fay Ray.
Yeah, but having said that, there were people at the BBC who were saying at the time that they were that bad because this was, of course, Ray Harryhausen movies were all the rage at the time. And the guy was saying, we can do basically a Ray Harryhausen stop motion at half the price. And he was like, yeah, go for it. And they gave him those things. Which, no, you're no Ray Harryhausen. That you really are not.
But yeah, in terms though of, actually that's another good example of locations. I've been on a London pub crawl of Doctor Who locations. No, you can do a Doctor Who locations pub crawl where I showed off slightly because at that point, it was around 2010, and I'd happened to meet Matt Smith by pure coincidence in a pub. He hadn't actually done anything as Doctor Who, but we knew he was going to be Doctor Who. I was like, oh, okay. And actually, there was a guy who was recording bits for a podcast. Then I mentioned having, as a child, been up the BT Tower, but we didn't get to do a segment on that, which I was, which of course is where Votan lives. Yes, Doctor Who is required. Which the War Machines we're coming up to in the podcasts. I have to say, for accuracy though, what you don't ever do, you never have anything white. Ever. The original TARDIS console was a kind of light green, which you can see in the docudrama, of course. Patrick Troughton's shirt was actually blue, but a very light blue. But when he came back in colour, they made it a deeper blue. And in terms of how the equipment could pick things up, of course, they had to change Hartnell's trousers and Jamie's kilt, because tweed, tartan, any checkers patterns, that would confuse 70s and 80s colour technology.
Well, I have some of the old Games Workshop 28mm miniatures of Doctor Who, and I can tell you, painting those patterns freehand with a tiny little brush is very difficult.
I don't doubt, and I think obviously they would have had to have white balanced, and some things were added for shading. The important thing to remember with Daleks, of course, is that the hemispheres on what we call the skirt section were supposed to be lights, but that was too expensive. But they were coloured blue purely for shading, because otherwise it would confuse the eye. So it's all meant to look like it's all silver, that's the only reason that they were different colours. Hence, if you look at Dalek toys from the 60s, they don't generally bother to actually colour things in blue.
I went to the Darpole factory in Wales, where they made the official Doctor Who toys for the whole classic series, actually. Until the new series started and somebody else got the license. Darpole were the only people licensed to do Doctor Who action figures. It was Harlequin and Games Workshop who got the sort of 28mm miniatures license, but Darpole did all of the plastics, all the sort of plastic 8-inch action figures, and it was really interesting to see how they sort of built them. They had an actual Doctor Who exhibition there for the classic series. And walking through, you got everything from they even had an exploded Dalek they were given. Oh, wow. Somebody gave them the exploded Dalek, which just goes to show how much the BBC valued Darpole's input.
I'm going to guess that's one of the Renegade ones from Remembrance.
Yes, and it's bubbling and green, and it looks really disgusting. In fact, it may be the one that tried to strangle Sylvester McCoy. So I can't remember quite where I was going. Oh yes, so I always love telling people the Daleks who have the lights that flash on their head with every syllable. That was an afterthought. Because otherwise you wouldn't know which Dalek was talking. They are, in the first Dalek serial, those are literally Christmas tree lights inside ping pong balls. Oh, yes.
But they're my favourite Dalek lights. I love that. Not because I know they're Christmas tree lights inside ping pong balls, I don't think Dalek lights have looked so good since. I think they're fantastic.
Well, unfortunately, with the way that Daleks have been used in the classic series, they've kind of become a little boring, to be honest. I mean, James goes on about the whole
the new series, you mean?
Yes, that goes on about their purpose is no longer there. Well, I'd say their purpose is probably. I mean, I'd say a Rutan would be more interesting in the current sort of.
We've never seen Sontarans and Rutans fight.
Well, we haven't. No, we've only seen one Rutan, and that was Horrorfang Rock, where Tom Baker did an amazing job speaking to a beach ball with a straight face. I mean, pretty much any actor, you ask them to have a conversation with what is obviously a bright green beach ball with string attached, and most of them would just swear at you and tell you to get lost. But wow. He gave it his all, and you really get the impression that he's talking to an alien creature.
Yeah. No, I really like Horrorfang Rock. There was one of those kind of semi-professional spin-offs called Shakedown, which is the only time you actually see Sontarans and Rutans in the same thing. And those people went on to set up. I think some of those people were involved in Big Finish. Who do the audio.
It's funny you should mention that, because the way I've always seen them as they're like the perfect representation of it's kind of deliberate that they're the perfect representation of the big, stupid, overly equipped, overly thrown at the enemy grunt army, like the US. And then you've got the sneaky guys who can turn into anybody and infiltrate, like what the Viet Cong were at the time, which was kind of the point. But now, the Rutans and the Sontarans have never been so relevant. But what do we get? We get Strax. Well, we have had one proper Sontarans, but I do like the one with the first one we had was Sontarans of the classics, from the new series, and that was
Sontaran Strategy
and
Poison Sky.
Poison Sky. I thought that worked really well as a Sontaran story, because Sontarans collaborate. I mean, it's the idea of Sontarans actually allying themselves with somebody else is somewhat antithetical to them, as was mentioned in the Two Doctors the last time they did it.
Okay.
But the fact that they're relying on this rather annoying, looks like, I had a feeling that character was kind of based on the sort of internet troll Ayn Randian type character.
Yeah.
And he was just horrible. But, he had this kind of strange sort of American-style libertarian outlook to things, and being very selfish and very stupid. And I thought he was he was a classic Doctor Who alien collaborator, but with a modern twist. And I loved the character for that. And the idea of the Sontarans needing somebody to actually help their invasion of Earth was quite funny in itself, because, again, the Doctor pointed out that why do you need allies if you're so mighty? And they're like, oh, we don't need allies. But you needed allies for this plot. We don't need allies! That and the nuclear weapons scene was hilarious, when they're coordinating all of the nuclear weapons across the world. And they're like India online, Pakistan online, and everyone's like taking a breath just in case they shoot them at each other. And then you go North Korea online, and you see the expression on the unit colonel's face when they say North Korea online. He's like, really? Funny enough, Doctor Who's just been sold to North Korea, so I have a feeling that scene may cause some trouble.
Oh, they actually went through with it, did
yes.
they? North Koreans will actually be watching Doctor Who. Wow, okay.
I think that scene may have sold them on it, actually, a bit like how Norman Wisdom managed to sell his films in Albania.
Right. Yeah, it is Kim Jong-il, or whatever his fucking name is. Could he be a Sontaran with a really shit wig?
I'm not so sure. I'm thinking, I mean, Sontarans aren't very... That's the thing. Jong-un, unlike his father, is actually not as militaristic and has actually had his uncle shot because of the fact his uncle was taking them down the militaristic road.
Right.
So he's not very Sontaran. I mean, admittedly, he looks it. But, no, it's if we're going to class him as a Doctor Who alien, I'd probably go with... like a renegade from Sill species.
Right, okay.
I can't remember what they're called. They have a mining...
the Thorus Beatons.
Yes, they're amazing, those little things. I mean, and the actor who played Sill, I can't remember.
Nabil Shabam.
Yes, he maintains to this day he should be getting royalties from Anthony Hopkins for stealing his Sill laugh and turning it into Hannibal Lecter's.
Oh, I hadn't even thought of that. I have Nabil Shaban on Facebook.
Oh, very nice.
I do, yes.
I know you had Toby Longworth on there, and Toby Longworth happens to be one of my favourite voice actors, so...
There you go. I've got a few
Nathaniel
celebs.
Caro himself. Yeah. I mean, wow. You don't have to have Jonathan Keeble on there, do you?
I don't. No.
Oh well, he does. He's another one of the ones in Heavy Entertainment's 140,000 audio dramas, and he's known for doing probably the single worst Mongolian accent ever for the White Scars. In fact, after he first premiered that accent in Sword of Truth, which is an audio drama, they did where they had a White Scar character as a central character, and they gave him dialogue full of R's that he wasn't pronouncing properly. Things like, "This place is under the authority of the White Scars." I mean, it was really, really, really over the top. There was actually rumours going around that the backlash was so bad that they were never going to let him do a White Scar again. But then I picked up another one of them recently, where he played he's in it with the guys who did the more subdued White Scar voices for the next book, the next audio drama, which they had some guys do some more subdued voices for the next one because they wanted to take it a bit more seriously. But for this one, they've got the subdued voice ones and Jonathan Keeble. And they have arguments with each other, which is hilarious. Because there's bits of the sort of the sensible voice actor is like, "I've never understood, brother, why you do not get that scar fix." And he's like, and then Jonathan Keeble replies, "Makes me pity as an annoying superior officer who keep asking me stupid questions."
I'm thinking we should probably wrap this up for this episode, which was called the.
And spend much time talking about the episode, but as you say,
10%.
There wasn't much to talk about. I'll agree with you there. It was a very sort of soap opera episode. You know,
even if the last 5 to 10 minutes had something, it still wouldn't have made up for the 40 minutes of blah 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 blah. Nothing could save this. It could not have been more tedious. I sound like James, but that wasn't an episode of Doctor Who. And seriously, that is the worst they've gone. I mean, Listen pissed me off quite hugely. The fact I'm expecting a lot from Peter Capaldi and the guy can't make silk purses out of, this episode, the whole thing was no. Which was it's more wanking because it's handing everything over to the soap opera story arc, yada yada yada. Oh, we'll throw you a robot at the end. Fuck off. And some supposed teaser where the bloke from Mock the Week.
Chris Addison, yes.
Chris
I'm
Addison.
actually quite pleased that Chris Addison's now in Doctor Who, because if there was ever a comic actor, because of course I know him most from The Thick of It, where he plays he actually, funnily enough, he was opposite Peter Capaldi. He plays.
He was. He's like.
He played. Yeah. Ollie, who is basically Peter Capaldi's long-suffering assistant.
It's basically Yes, Prime Minister, isn't it? If Peter Capaldi's Humphrey.
It's less like Yes, Prime Minister. It's not about the civil service. It's because there's only one civil servant character. It's about the PR firms. It's very different from that point. People do call it Yes Minister with tons of F-bombs, but it's from the PR firm point of view.
Okay.
And the way they finally brought it to an end was absolutely amazing, because they literally they did their research really well, and they did ask people like Alistair Campbell, Andy Coulson, and that. They asked them what will be the apocalypse for PR firms, and they said, well, basically, if there was ever a public inquiry into leaking. So that's what they did. And they had every single member of the PR firms and the minister's team and all the politicians having to justify all of the leaks they've made ever in front of basically 3 judges. And it was so funny, especially as Malcolm Tucker finally got his comeuppance, because
wow.
You would never expect it. You were expecting him to wiggle out of it. And he even actually managed to nobble one of the judges on the panel by leaking that she'd been involved somewhere else in the middle of the leaking inquiry. If she'd been involved in some criminal dealings, after she asked him a very tough question.
Right. I need to watch The Thick of It to the end. I've seen quite a lot of The Thick of It. I've seen the movie. What was the movie called?
In the Loop.
In the Loop, yes.
And
I've seen that.
Was mostly. I think that's the best thing about that is the fact that it was made for an American audience, and you have the Thick of It crew basically dealing with their opposite numbers in America, who are just so far below them in Machiavellian terms, and so straightforward, and not just sort of very sort of brutally honest and stupid. It worked really well, and they did have a couple of American writers on board to make sure they got that part to work. Okay. And there's also probably my favourite scene from that has to be the one he's just walking through the street, swearing into his phone at somebody in London because they've screwed something up, and this guy walks up and goes, "Hey, buddy, enough of the curse words, huh?" And he starts, "Kiss my sweaty balls." And he just runs off.
We're having so much fun talking about... Would you be okay being on a podcast with me and James talking about Neverwhere?
I haven't seen Neverwhere.
You have to see a Neil Gaiman series.
Yes,
that has...
I know of it. My old boss at Postmodern Studios actually wrote the official role-playing game of Neverwhere.
Oh.
With Neil Gaiman as a co-writer, and it was done as a free download, not actually as a commercial product, because Neil Gaiman didn't fancy it being a commercial product. But he said it's fine. Grimm being Grimm said it's fine. It's not a commercial product. It will get me the name recognition, and you get your foot in the ground in role-playing games. He says, cool.
I think I can link you Neverwhere, and if me and James talk Neverwhere, that could be a wonderful Well,
that sounds like the most that sounds like it's going to be quite the exciting conversation.
it could very well be. You, me, and James is a combination that hasn't been tried before.
Yeah.
A new recipe.
Yeah, it is a combination we haven't tried before because I haven't actually met James in person, so.
Right. Well, you have met me in person.
Yes,
sorry.
and obviously I haven't spoken to both of you at the same time, so that'll be an interesting experience in itself.
I don't think I'm quite as opinionated or overpowering as James.
Oh, yeah, well, I get that. I do get that impression from his video.
Give James his own country. That would be quite terrifying. I don't think I'm quite as bad.
Oh, well, I know quite a few people who's thinking of splitting away from the UK and their own little micronations, so...
Oh, absolutely. Fifield Road, E17, is definitely going to secede very soon. I'm voting for it. But and don't forget tooting power for the people.
Oh yes.
You got that reference?
Yes, I got that reference. I've had enough people call me it on Facebook.
You're Wolfie.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this up then. My final thoughts on what was the piece of shit called again? Oh, the Caretaker. My final thoughts are blah 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 blah. Ian, your final thoughts on blah blah blah.
I think, yeah, you do have a point about it being soap opera-y, but at the same time, they did it with the Doctor was still very much prominent in the episode. It wasn't a Doctor light episode, like some of the worst episodes of all time, like Love and Monsters have been.
Okay.
And it really worked as a sort of a very, how shall I put it? Not necessarily a short episode because it wasn't short. Well, it's 45 minutes, it's standard running time.
Yeah.
The sort of the Doctor Who bits of it became very short. Maybe they could have done with stacking in a few more hazards to make basically this kind of sort of soppy love story going on, whilst literally absolutely everything that can go wrong is going wrong. I'm talking Lamenter's level disaster here. So one alien 1 minute, walk out of another broom cupboard, there's a Saigon in it, or the headmaster is a Rutan or whatever. Just make it completely insane if you're going to do something like this. Give the proper fans their due.
Yeah, I suppose I can see your point of view. I really felt this was very lazy and taking Doctor Who into a direction I don't. If I wanted EastEnders, I'd tune in for EastEnders. If I wanted a sitcom,
I think people said that when they first put the first feelers out about Rose Tyler, actually, at the start in 2005. People said...
I can understand that. Yeah,
and,
that was... Yeah.
I really cannot stand Rose Tyler.
Right.
Well, I didn't mind her for the first two series she was in, and I think if Russell T Davies had the guts to kill her off, she'd have been a passable companion. I'm talking sort of Victoria Waterfield level.
Okay.
Yes, I did just use the most ridiculous companion ever.
No, not at all.
No, the most ridiculous was probably Chameleon, but I like Chameleon, so... But, no, what's it? I think that the way they brought her back with the lisp, with the big gun, and just had her as some kind of superhero in the other dimension for no discernible reason, and then they had to the living blow-up doll of David Tennant because she couldn't be without David Tennant. Why? That was just so creepy.
Well, the Davis era is past. They were still keeping the action going. This episode is the first episode of Doctor Who where I have ever said if I wanted EastEnders, I'd have tuned into EastEnders. If I'd wanted what sitcoms do people watch nowadays?
I don't know. Mrs. Brown's
I'm so
Boys?
old.
Mrs. Brown's Boys?
Mrs. Brown's Boys. There you go.
I don't watch it, but
I've never seen it. If I wanted some... Actually, I'm tempted to say Grange Hill. Which is, well, technically I suppose that would be a kid's soap opera which ended a few years ago. And can I just say the opening to this episode was racist?
I'll listen to how you're going through.
They are basically, and actually to be honest, because Courtney is a character we're introduced to in Deep Breath.
Oh, yes.
We see briefly in another episode I can't name. And nothing against the Courtney character. That's actually kind of cool. If they have that thing going there, we'll see where they're taking that. But the opening minutes of this episode do equate black children and teenagers with being troublemakers, and teenage troublemakers with being black. This
isn't Courtney's first appearance, by the way.
I've just mentioned that.
Yeah.
But there are other black teenagers. There are lots of troublemakers.
Oh, yes.
Who are black.
Yes, I do get where you're coming from. They could have at least thrown a couple of. They could have thrown at least a couple of sort of white guys with sort of squints or whatever.
They are profiling.
Yeah.
I don't think, and I know Doctor Who's past. Doctor Who is not a racist show, far from it. What they're doing this season, though, and for God's sake, Stephen Moffat, we already know that you're an incompetent when it comes to feminism, and a bad. You try to be an ally to the... I've got to use the new term. GSD? Yes. You try to be an ally to GSD people, but you are not that great. You try, though. But still. And now you get this... Why did the teenage boy troublemakers have to... All of them were black.
I can see where you're coming from now, and the more you say it, the more it sort of pops out at me. Yeah, and the CPO being basically very sort of grumpy Victor Meldrew Git type thing. CSO,
right.
That is. For those who don't realise what CSO is, a CSO is a community support officer, which is also known as a plastic plodder. Which is like a demi police officer type thing we have going on for some reason.
So, yeah, okay, I thought this episode... actually, to be honest, I don't often say it. If there's an anti-defamation league out there, look at this fucking episode. And then I was bored for at least half an hour. And I wanted to gnaw one of my own legs off, and got to the point where I was going, by the time there was any plot, when will this end? When will this end? I'm watching this to the end out of loyalty because it's Doctor Who. I now understand what it feels like when I make you, James, watch a musical. I want to... Never mind gnawing my own leg. I want to cut it. I want to saw my own leg off. I want to deep fry it and have it with chips like it's Kentucky Fried Chicken, so as to literally eat my own leg, so as to distract me from the shite that is this.
Well, whatever. The thing is, whatever the series throws at me, I don't think they can ever beat Love and Monsters for the worst episode ever. I mean, I don't know if you're aware of a chap called Nash from That Guy with the Glasses website.
No.
He does weekly weird news podcasts, but he also does Doctor Who reviews, and he's got to because he went back and did classic Doctor Who classic series reviews but he picked particularly episodes that troubled him. But at the same time, he did do a couple of new Who ones, and he teamed up with a really hardcore classic series fan called Diamanda Hagen, who's a Northern Irish comedian. And she was like, and they actually teamed up together to do Love and Monsters because it was so bad. And they both agreed that it's the worst thing that's ever happened. So a fan of the new series and a fan of the classic series getting together and agreeing this is the worst thing that can possibly happen to Doctor Who. It goes uphill from here.
My feeling of trepidation, as I think I've mentioned, is Missy, the gatekeeper of the Nethersphere, a female super arch villain written by Moffat. This isn't going anywhere good.
Could be the Black Guardian.
Could be a female Black Guardian. Could be a female Master. Could be the Rani. Could be a female future Doctor.
Diamanda has a phrase which is, and everybody's the Rani until proven otherwise.
Absolutely. Actually, can we wrap this up now?
Okay, sure. Sorry.
I want Moffat. I don't want Moffat to die, but he has had 5 years at this job. I'm just saying 5 years could be long enough. He looks tired. He needs to spend more time with his family.
Yeah. Oh well.
Your final thoughts, Ian?
I think it was, it's not an episode for everyone. It's certainly not an episode for people who just have it's not an episode for most of the fans. That's the problem. It is a good episode if you're a recent convert, because it's mostly relatively sane. It's boring, but it's sane. It's not.
45 minutes of Grange Hill, and there's a robot at the end.
Pretty much, but it's a good way of slowly building people up towards more fantastical things. I suppose it'd be a good one if you were to sort of get somebody who's like really into sort of the soaps and the whatever, and you wanted to get them into science fiction. You could always plonk this on and say, "Oh, okay, we're just going to sit down and watch this soap," and they realise they're watching Doctor Who by the end of it.
Oh, no, trick them by showing them Grange Hill, and then somebody wheels out a robot, and it's Doctor Who. I do like science. I hate that idea. I hate that.
I've had it work in the past. Well, not necessarily for that media, but in role playing, it's worked when people have. The problem with a lot of really good role playing games is nobody wants to play them, and particularly Wraith the Oblivion, which is so depressing. Now, I heard about a mate of mine who did, in order to do a Wraith campaign, what he did is just, okay, you're all playing mortals and you're on a plane to start with. And okay, we're all mortals, we're on a plane. And they all had all sorts of secret identities and secret plots and things. They were all working. Then the plane crashes. Congratulations, everyone, you're playing Wraith.
Well, in any case, Ian, your final thought and goodbye.
Yeah, not great, but I don't think it's nearly as bad as you say. And yeah, that's how I think. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series, see what we actually end up with. And I do like Chris Addison is now a Doctor Who villain, because I think if you're going to have an incompetent servant, you might as well bring in one that was previously under the Doctor.
Okay, I'm gonna say if James is ever in a situation where he has to commit suicide, and I choose between this episode and the cyanide pill, this episode of Doctor Who would be more powerful. This is take this and die. Sorry, you've gone silent. I really, really hate this. However, I have reminded myself of a Grange Hill, which of course, much like Doctor Who, had one of the they changed the theme tune for a bit, but I want the proper, the classic, real Grange Hill theme tune, which they went back to. So next episode, fuck knows. Do that, do that, doing, 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 do do. That's the bit where the sausage floats across the screen, if you remember.
Don't make me sing the Taggart tune.
Da 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 da, dun, dun, dun.
The Taggart tune used to have lyrics, apparently.